doesn't happen often in Test cricket for India at home. The Guwahati Test is 3 days of utter domination by the opposition, and you've gone through generations without seeing that happen often. And yet, if you started watching Test cricket a year back, it's almost like it's happened again at the back of a 3-0 whitewash to New Zealand, which we thought would be a one-off. But India is staring down what could be a 2-0 clean sweep against South Africa, but for something spectacular on the last 2 days of the Guwahati Test. This is ESPNcricinfo Matchday, and South Africa are effectively 314 without loss at stumps on day 3. We'll hear from, I'm sure, a very pleased Vernon Philander as to how good the World Test champions have been. First, Saba, Karim, I hope I didn't over-dramatize the opening there, because we're not used to this, Saba, are we? At some point, we think even if the opposition senses they're on top, India have the skills and the experience to fight back. Spinners outbowl other spinners. Batters bat better than the opposition. This Test match is flipped around for someone like you who's watched Indian cricket for as long as he has.
And that is the most surprising aspect of this entire series, Raunak. One could always feel that there will be moments where India will recover and come back strongly and upset the opposition. But we didn't see that happen even at Eden Gardens. And in this Test match, look at the number of sessions that South Africa have won. I'm just trying to recall an overseas team coming to Indian shores, and out of 9 sessions, they have won 8. This is unbelievable. That goes to show that maybe we are not actually assessing the gulf that we have seen between both these teams. On one side, you have the defending champions who were very well prepared. They had the right kind of resources to do well in these conditions, and they've been able to adapt much better. On the other hand, a study and contrast has been the Indian side. On a track that we have noticed in this Test match, decent track where you could bat for hours and hours, we were unable to apply ourselves. So I think that just explains the gulf between both the teams.
All right, Vernon, let's get your point on this, because this must be so pleasing, so satisfying from a South African standpoint. I wonder if it's exceeding expectations, even for the high standards South Africa have recently set in their Test cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely exceeding expectations. From my side personally, I think having been in India, having played in those kind of conditions, facing up to spin, I think it's always been a little bit of a weak point, in our game. But I think a lot of credit to this team. I think they played, what's in front of them pretty well. They make their assessment and they make their adjustments. So I think they've summed up conditions. They've summed, what's going to be, making them effective, obviously on and in these conditions, and they've executed to perfection. But I think just a little bit on India. I'm really concerned about the way that they've obviously approached and applied themselves in this particular Test match. And very often, you look at a team and you look at their attitude, and I just feel that there's a lot of frustration starting to show in this Indian team. Whether it be on the field. And very often, yes, you've lost your leader, and he's got a set way of doing things. And I'm not sure whether that has such a big influence on this particular unit. Now having to make the adjustment to play under a new captain, he's got his own way of obviously going about things. So it's just starting to show that there's a lot of frustration creeping up, in this Indian team at the moment.
Let's extend on that then. Yes, it's a very unfortunate time to lose Shubman Gill, the captain, but I don't think we felt like things would fall apart with due respect to Gill in his absence. We feel India have depth and reserves, and they have quality players. And yet the problem doesn't necessarily, if I may say, Saba, seem one or two things. It's not about, whether Washi batted higher or could have batted higher or Sai Sudarshan. It just seems like there's a lot of things that don't feel right about Indian cricket. Do you share that feeling?
Yes, Raunak. I think that willingness to fight one has not seen in this Test series. Well, in fact, even against New Zealand. And if you look at the batters in the past from India, they have been so adept in tiring out the bowlers, the opposition attack. We would keep them on the field for longer hours. We would tire them out. And that's when we would start to score runs and look to dominate. It has happened even maybe India versus England series under Virat Kohli. The matches would get over on the 4th day and the 5th day. And all that would happen because Indian batters would bat for longer hours, really push the opposition on the back foot, and then try and accelerate and get into a stronger position to dominate and win Test matches. So that has been missing in this approach from the Indian. We can say it as a young batting lineup, but there is experience. You have KL Rahul at the top. Yashasvi Jaiswal has got enough Test matches under his belt. You have Rishabh Pant. So they have have enough experience in the lineup. And I think what has been questionable is, as Vernon rightly said, it is the approach, it is lack of temperament, and this lack of skill to spend more and more time at the wicket. And I think that is the reason why India has suffered so much. Even in the previous Test match, I can understand that the ball was turning here and there. There was variable bounce, but was there an effort from the Indian batters to put the head down and bat for long hours? I didn't see that happen. And on a so-called docile surface, although Marco Jansen bowled so well, but an excellent batting strip. If you ask any of these domestic players, even at this stage, they would say, "Oh, this is ideal batting condition where you can bat for long and put runs under your belt and score big hundreds."
So, how much of this is the player responsibility, and how much of it, sometimes when we talk about the overall scheme of things, and we're speaking of the Test team in particular, because we're not seeing, Cheteshwar Pujara said something on Jio Hotstar at the end of the last Test. He says, whether they're in transition or not, it's unacceptable that they lose at home. And I can see where a proud Indian player who got, a recent great has that sort of emotion. He's been part of transitions himself as well. Where I'm trying to come from is, how much do things like changing these combinations and tactics or changing batting orders, how much of that contributes to this situation? Or regardless of all that, you expect better from the players that you put out on the park?
I think in home conditions, Raunak, I would put the blame on the individual player. I can understand all these things do happen, but these are favorable conditions. And you're used to batting in such conditions. So I think in the end, it is the batter, how he prepares to play in these conditions and put runs on board. But then the other side of the story is that, are we backing players who have done well at the domestic level? I don't see that happen. And I think if that is not happening, then it requires a lot of introspection. Are we picking players in the Test lineup based on performances that they have shown in the shortest format of the game, or even in white ball cricket? I'm talking about one-day cricket. Do we need to go back and assess the way we are picking sides for the Test 11, especially batters? Why now one can also talk about the spinners, whom we have picked in the 11, or whom do we have picked in the Test squad. So don't you think this is the time for the selectors and the team management to basically go through the entire process and go back and pick players who have done well for the respective state sides in Ranji Trophy?
Yeah, but I think that's Saba, on the bowling point of view, don't you think this was India's best bowling lineup? With Bumrah, Siraj, Kuldeep and Jadeja, that's what you effectively need in these conditions. I think one of the bigger concerns, along with the batting, is how India have conceded 489 when they're expected to rein an opposition in.
Yeah, in terms of pace bowlers, I think this is the best pick selectors could have thought of, with Bumrah and Siraj, both of them in prime form. Ravindra Jadeja, you would expect him to bowl much better, especially when the ball is turning. We didn't see that. The wicket, one can say, was not so favourable towards Jadeja. But the other two bowlers, Kuldeep Yadav also, I was expecting more from him. Vashi Sundar, I'm looking more at him as a batting all-rounder than a person who can really generate a lot of spin or turn from this kind of a surface.
Sure.
So again, you need to go back and go through the entire process of searching for genuine spinners at the domestic level.
Yeah, flip side, and Vernon, I do thank you for your patience while we just try and go deeper into the Indian side of things. But Shukri Conrad on the South African side and Tremba Bavuma, they came with the players that might succeed here. They overcame the slow starters syndrome that you brought up many times. But in this Test match, the spinners seem to be identifying or assessing what pace to bowl at better than India's. Marco Jansen's proved to be far greater a threat than any of India's seamers, even though they are India's best two seamers. How much of this just down to a highly skilled and perhaps, but from an Indian standpoint, underestimated South African team?
Yeah, I think the one thing that Shukri Conrad has done, fantastically well is winning the trust of his players. And I think, just to Saba's point, when you play international cricket, there needs to be a consistency in communication from the selectors down to the players. And also there need to be a consistency in selection. I think it's not like one-day cricket or T20 cricket where you can replace a player and he has a massive impact on a particular game or two. Test match cricket is about spending time out in the middle. It is about getting used to and comfortable with your batting position. So chopping and changing the batting lineup, to fit in one or two all-rounders. I mean, I'm a massive fan of playing specialist players. And I mean, you can see from a South African perspective, yes, Shukri Conrad has backed a couple of players and they're going to come good eventually. So Yeah, I mean, for me, the standout player, I think this test match, we're going to have to give that baton to Marco Jansen for the way that he's
Yes.
come out number one and checked his whole outlook on test match cricket. I think that first test match, there have been a lot of doubt, as to his batting, the way he's obviously approached his batting, the application he's shown. But I think this time round, Supri Corrie have probably set him down and said, listen, your game is to take the game forward. I think you've got a wonderful read in terms of, those long levers. So take on the spinners. And he looks a completely different player. And I think it was always going to rub off into his bowling. I mean, he's perhaps the one bowler that you can take into, wickets that's a lot flatter because he can, take the surface out of play completely with an extra tall length, the bounce he can generate. So I think from a tactic point of view, perhaps South Africa has done their homework a lot better than India. But I just feel from an Indian perspective, yeah, there needs to be a little bit more time, given to these guys to get accustomed to their batting positions, especially in the top six.
All right, let's go deeper into Marco Jansen, shall we? Because this is now a significant impact he's had on this test match, a 6 for to follow his 90. And let's just first talk about the success of his bowling, Vernon. And I can point out, for an all-rounder to do it, he's in great company. Only a few handful have done it, and it is Ian Botham's birthday today. So Marco Jansen is, perhaps we don't speak about him as among the top all-rounders in the world. We speak of Stokes and Jadeja often enough, but with this kind of performance, he's surely up there, Vernon.
Yeah, I think he's definitely announced himself with this performance, and I think from a world perspective, very often, we look at the top three, and that's where we draw all the superstars from. But I think the way he's been going about his game, he's been growing in confidence over the last sort of 24 months. I think the one thing that has been lacking has been the control with the ball. So him and the bowling coach Pete Botha, have spent a lot of time at length discussing, what's going to make him effective. I don't think he's going to be, the traditional bowler to get the ball up there and bring the stumps into play because of his height. So he'll have to look at alternative ways of getting batters out. And I think in South Africa, we've seen it, where he's had a leg slip, a leg gully, a guy under the helmet. So his modes of dismissals is going to be a lot different to a guy that's obviously, I wouldn't say half his length, but a whole lot shorter than him, because of the amount of bounce that he seems to, obviously, extract out of surfaces. So wonderful adjustment from him. I think it's also about the player starting to understand himself, being a lot more comfortable within, his frame of mind. And you can just see there's a confidence pattern that's rubbing off on Marco Jansen, and really, I mean, it is the team that's benefiting at the end of the day.
Yeah, modes of dismissals is quite unique for an Indian test match, Saba, with 10 dismissals caught, not a single LBW in bowl. Usually if foreign bowlers come here, they try and bring the slips in the gully and the keeper into play. It's not a good plan, but Marco Jansen's made it work like a charm.
Or the plan is to bowl those reverse swinging deliveries in Indian conditions, but this has been a different dimension altogether from Marco Jansen. I guess that that now finally Marco Jansen has understood the kind of potential he has. This whole idea of adjusting to different conditions and how to perform to his best, one saw that in this test match, and there is so much of learning from the previous test match also. But it also goes to show that there is somebody sitting with him who is working out a game plan for him, be it while batting or while bowling. And for him to adapt all that and to learn so quickly, that goes to show how much effort he has put in. Those well-directed short pitch deliveries towards the rib cage, be it against a left-hander or right-hander, was the one that troubled most of the batters. And that is why we saw so many dismissals of the one you talked about. And on this kind of a surface where the other bowlers have struggled to bowl those climbing deliveries, Marco Jansen was able to do it so easily. And very rhythmic, repeatable kind of delivery stride and the kind of an action. He was able to generate that steep bounce.
And I think even this surface has helped, right? Red soil tends to give you
that extra bounce and the carry. So I think, that's another point, Raunak, that for overseas pace bowlers to come to this part of the world and to understand that on red soil surface, if you're willing to bend your back, you will get that extra bounce, and that may end up troubling the Indian batters. That is the kind of game plan they worked on.
He also, I think, bowled just the right areas at Kolkata when the pitch was going off, and he bowled those two that really took off to KL Rahul and Jaiswal. And to think, South Africa, we thought, Vernon, had a big miss in Kagiso Rabada. Now, I think they would have both played anyway in South Africa's 11, but Jansen's barely made us have a need to mention KG Rabada in his absence.
Yeah, but I think it's still a massive plus to have a Kagiso Rabada there. You've got first-hand experience of playing in India. But also, I think the language spoken, I think it's an important one. And Kagiso would form part of that conversation around, how to be effective in Indian conditions. And I think, again, just having these senior players around the group, yes, it's highly unfortunate that he's been missing out. I think he's perhaps the one bowler that you wanted to form part of this historic, moment. If South Africa are to beat India, you perhaps wanted a Kagiso Rabada because it just fits him, to be a part of that setup. But again, it just speaks volumes of the amount of experience that he brings to the group. I think, and I just get a sense that there's a massive calmness around the South African bowling lineup. It's almost like they're in control. They know what they want to execute with the ball. So yeah, he would definitely form part of that conversation. But a massive miss on the field. I think he's become so accustomed to when South Africa takes to the field that we see Kagiso Rabada leading from the front, but missing in these two Test matches. But again, it just speaks volumes of the depth of South African cricket as well. That there are bowlers to replace him and quality bowlers to replace him. So yeah, a job well done so far. But we still need 10 wickets in the second innings.
Let's go straight to that then, and what South Africa's plans might be with 2 days of play left, and we've done the calculation of about 160 overs that we might get at best. Now, in the days gone by, Vernon, you wouldn't need the result, 1-0 series win, you'd take happily, just keep batting and bat as long as you like. But with the World Test Championship, the prospect of a win being greater than a draw, and the history that it would mean for Temba Bavuma to have a 2-0 sweep in India, do they have a number in mind in terms of targets and runs, Vernon, or do they have overs in mind as to how long they would need to get 10 more Indian wickets?
Yeah, I feel given how the first innings panned out for India, this is about time for South Africa. They want to afford themselves perhaps an opportunity to have 2 new balls available to them. So I foresee they're probably going to try and bat a session and a half and really allow themselves, because you never know what you're going to get in that last session. So perhaps give themselves 30 to 40 overs at India tomorrow afternoon and hopefully knock 3-4 wickets down, by the end of play. And then obviously allow themselves enough time to knock off the rest or knock over the rest in the following day, but also having another new ball at their disposal at some stage.
A session and a half would be perhaps 40 odd overs,
yes,
to bat. Now, it's not been an easy pitch to get 7 an over from. Who knows if we get that tomorrow? But if South Africa get, say, another 200 or so, 200 is a lot in 40 overs. But I'm trying to think from the Indian standpoint here. Do you sit back and wait for the declaration? Or do you tell yourself, we have to get these runs anyway to salvage the series, so we're going to chase no matter what? Should we even entertain the thought of trying to bowl South Africa out tomorrow? It's a tough one from the Indian camp.
It is a very tough one, Raunak.
Yeah.
And I think now the ball is entirely in South Africa's court. And I feel that South Africa, first half an hour will decide the path ahead tomorrow morning. If South Africa don't lose a wicket in the first half an hour, then they would look to get runs in an aggressive manner, I'm looking at maybe 150 from here. That'll give them a lead of 470, 475.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, they will be left with about 120 odd overs. So we talked about this 2 new ball in the picture, and I think that'll give enough opportunities for South Africa to bowl out India. For India to even conjure something miracle is very difficult at this stage, and I think India finds themselves in a very awkward position as of now, Raunak.
Quick summation on whether you expect the surface to play differently on day 4 and day 5. Will things happen faster than they have in the test match so far?
In fact, with the new ball, I see some turn and bounce, so that should encourage both the sides for that matter. More so for South Africa, they would expect the wicket to break maybe in the second half tomorrow, and I think that then it'll get easier for the spinners to operate better and to be more effective. And I feel the harder ball makes a big difference. So that is why we keep talking about 2 new balls to be used from South Africa's perspective. But for India, these are very tough times. So what is India looking at now, Raunak? And I think India would give their best shot first half an hour, 45 minutes. If they can pick up 3-4 wickets, then they know that maybe they're trying to push South Africa from wherein South Africa then would like to bat longer so that they don't give enough runs for
Yeah,
India.
I think a best case scenario is if India can somehow trigger a collapse
something
and
like
find
that.
themselves chasing closer to a 400.
400, then they can. Then there's nothing left aside from chasing that huge target, which will be a very difficult ask for India.
All right. Well, let's just see where this stands at tea time tomorrow, and we have a long, detailed chat, I'm sure, from both sides. So the tremendous success that is staring down South Africa if they finish the job, and what that means for India if they are to go down in a 2-0 sweep. But Vernon Philander predicts sessions better than anyone on the planet. So off you go again, Vernon. Let's go. It's tea time tomorrow. Where will this game stand? South Africa's lead 3-1-4.
Yeah, I think South Africa, I mean, they're going to be at time. So I foresee perhaps them losing 2 wickets in that opening session. 90 runs. I think that would set them up perfectly to make a call at tea time. I think that's going to be, the time where they're going to assess where they are at the game and how they want to push forward. But I think a wonderful scenario is obviously because of that World Test Championship points. I don't think a draw is going to be sufficient here for South Africa. So I think they will be thinking of going for this game, irrespective of the series win. I mean, they shouldn't lose, if they get to 450 ahead in this game. So I think it's just about time, and they'll make that assessment or that call at tea time tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, you've done all the hard work, and there's a 2-0 staring at you. You just go for it, shouldn't you, if you're South Africa?
You love to garner as many points as possible.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of on a platter for South Africa. It is for them to enforce a win here.
And I think on the flip side, it might be significant come the end of the cycle for India's chances of making another final.
Once you get into this position, why miss out? And I think for India, the biggest takeaway would be if they can manage a draw. And if they can bat out time, that may not be such an easy task for India.
All right. Well, for the most optimistic India fan also, if you have to make a prediction for tomorrow morning's session?
I'm going with Vernon now. I think if South Africa can get to about, for the loss of a couple of wickets, 70, 80 on board, then the next 10 overs, 12 overs post-tea, they can really go big and get another 50, 60 on board, and that will be enough for South Africa to bowl out India in the 4th innings.
All right, Saba, Karim, thank you very much. Vernon Philander, you as well. South Africa well and truly in control at Guwahati, and we see how things stand on day 4 when we're live next. Join us then for ESPN Cricinfo Matchday.